I was doing some research on Employment Hero the other day. The first thing that came up was this headline that Employment Hero is the biggest export from Australia since Atlassian. I mean, man, do you feel any pressure when you see that type of stuff?
I can't remember seeing that one, but that's that's pretty cool. When you're in a very entrepreneurial environment, it's very easy to say everything's working and to keep going and going and going. And it's sometimes you need that sort of like chief reality officer, I think we call it internally. Maybe that's me a lot of the time.
Damn, that's a good one. Chief reality officer.
Yeah, to put the handbrake on or just to say it's not working and let's do something else. We know that our remote-first approach is actually our secret sauce. We can find talent wherever, and it's been extremely lucrative. It's not just about the headcount, it's about like execution. It's about having good people. A players, we've got people, I think, in 25 different countries.
25 different countries?
Yeah, that we employ. Yeah.
That's crazy. Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to Run the Numbers, the podcast where we dive into the real strategies behind scaling high-growth companies. Today, I am joined by Rob Paterson, CFO of Employment Hero, one of Australia's premier startups, to talk about smart growth, the realities of scaling in Australia, and why not all revenue is good revenue. Avoid those empty calories, those Cheetos. We're starting with SaaS metrics that matter, how to spot the red flags of bad revenue, when to say no to growth, and which financial metrics companies obsess over way too much. Drop them. Then we get into the Australian startup ecosystem, the strengths that set it apart, the challenges founders have to work harder to overcome, and how companies like Employment Hero are navigating global expansion. Going global on day one is a must. And of course, we'll talk about forecasting and efficiency, how Rob applies the 80-20 rule to revenue, cost control, and uncovering hidden opportunities. This one's packed with insights on scaling, smart financial strategy, and maybe even a wild fraud story from Rob's auditing days. Oh yeah. Let's get into it after a short word from our sponsors. Trust isn't earned, it's demanded. Whether you're a startup founder navigating your first audit or a seasoned security professional scaling your GRC program, proving your commitment to security has never been more critical or complex. That's where Vanta comes in. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks, like SOC 2 and ISO 27001. Centralize security workflows, complete questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Vanta not only saves you time, it can also save you money. A new IDC white paper found that Vanta customers achieve $535,000 per year in benefits, and the platform pays for itself in just 3 months. Join over 9,000 global companies like Atlassian, Cora, and Factory, who use Vanta to manage risk and improve security in real time. For a limited time, our audience gets $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/metrics. That's vanta.com/metrics for $1,000 off. Here's a question. When was the last time you really had time to focus on growth and not chasing contract renewals, tracking shadow IT spend, or explaining rising software costs to the board? Yikes. The truth is, traditional spend management is broken. If you're still piecing together data from 5 different systems just to figure out what you're actually spending, while vendors keep on pushing those auto renewals and price hikes, my friend, I got a solution for you. That's where Tropic comes in. Tropic is an intelligent spend management solution that consolidates your spend data and processes into one unified offering, enabling insights and decisive action. It doesn't just show you where the problems are, it helps you solve them. From spotting hidden optimization opportunities like duplicative spend, to automating those painful procurement workflows, to giving you the best market data that turns every vendor negotiation in your favor. Tropic combines smart insights with real human expertise to keep you ahead of the curve. And I can say firsthand because I've used them for over 2 years. Their SaaS platform helps me with price checks. It helps me keep my calendar organized of when renewals are coming up and I can actually visualize it. And let me say, it saves me more than 10 hours a week on vendor management, and we've saved a ton on renewals. I'm walking into the boardroom with a lot more confidence. Isn't it time to turn your spend management into your competitive advantage? Visit tropicapp.io/mostlymetrics. That's tropicapp.io/mostlymetrics. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market. Rates will rise, rates will fall. Can someone please just invent a crystal ball already? Until then, over 40,000 businesses have future-proofed their companies with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. Whether you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If you listen to this podcast, you'll know I ask CFOs all the time to rep their tech stacks, and I would say almost every one of them use NetSuite. And that's what I would use too. Whether you're a company earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/metrics. The guide is free to you. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, it's netsuite.com/metrics. Please, guys, I really need this. Rob, welcome to the show, my friend.
CJ, great to be here. Been a fan for a while, and I think I might be the first guest based in Australia. So great to be here.
You are the first guest in Australia, and you now hold the title for earliest recording. So I'm really sorry to be making you do this at 7:30 a.m.
All good. Great to be here and great to chat. And great. The pod's listened by lots of people along the way, all over the globe. So it's great to finally reach Australia.
I'm going to clip that and send it to my mom because I put it on in the car the other day for her. And she's like kind of politely hinting at like, oh, this is some interesting content. I wonder who listens to it. And I'll be like, Mom, I got CFOs in Australia listening to this. Okay.
Wow. It's good to know that folk in North America have heard of Australia. So yeah, that's epic.
We're going to warm up here with some metrics, but I definitely want to dive into what it's like running a company like Employment Hero in Australia. And the first one that I wanted to start out with is around revenue. And you had this quote that like hit me at a visceral level. It was, "Not all revenue is good revenue." And I feel you, man. But can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, sure. For us or for me personally, I think from a macro level, there's two types of revenue that I think about: non-recurring and recurring. And I think the best way to think about it for anyone who's just like starting out or even experienced is like, non-recurring means you have to go out and replace that each month. Whereas recurring, you start with that revenue again every single month. So it's super important. You can acquire a customer and that can give you a yield over time for recurring revenue. That's gold for me. And if that revenue is, again, like the next thing to add is super high revenue, super high margin revenue, that's gold for me.
And that was the second bit that I was kind of honing in on. Like you can have revenue that's kind of empty calorie revenue in the sense that it could still be recurring. Like you get it every month, but maybe you're paying an exorbitant amount through the eyeballs of like API fees. It's like not really your data underlying it or just your cost of goods sold in order to deliver it are super high.
Yeah, super important, especially like, Employment Hero is a software business, and like having like very, very high margins is really important to us. So for me, the benchmark there is any sort of like gross margins above 80%, but also how we think about it internally is like we double click on. It's not just the macro view at the top line P&L. We'll double click on to each product line and make sure we're tracking gross margins and we're incrementally improving those margins. That's a big thing for us and me, is just reviewing things over time and having sort of not just strategic initiatives but also tactical day-to-day initiatives that we can do to make small increments that mean a lot over time. And the bigger you become as a business, those become sort of big, not just that percentage increase, but also the dollar increase. Yeah.
Right on. And do you give like new products a little bit of grace or leadway to get their gross margin up over time? Or like if we're in the software business, should you be at 80 like from day one?
No, definitely. I'd like them to be at 80 from day one for sure. But yeah, new products and new markets, we give some leeway. And it's more about, having a plan, having sort of like some decent people really just thinking about like where it could get to, and not just saying, okay, we've closed, a lot of revenue here and it's 10%, and no one's thinking about where that 10% is going to go. Not that it would be that low, but yeah, definitely.
What I've found is like a lot of people think they understand what it costs to produce a product or how you make money off the product. But like when you get into the nitty gritty and start to explain it, like we pay this in order to deliver that, it's kind of illuminating to people. So I've had to, like in my career, do these SaaS 101 sessions, which isn't really just like, this is what ARR is. This is what it costs to produce that ARR.
Yeah, we've done some of that in the past, and we have to educate the business, especially when you go through different like cycles of growth and different stages. It becomes more important. For example, when you're like, I started at Employment Hero very, very early. We only had a couple of 100K of ARR, and we had different views on where we wanted to get to, and the underlying metrics to today. But today is not just the ARR and the ARR growth, it's also the gross margins and people making sure people can understand that, because the margin profiles like at 30% versus 80% mean you need much less revenue to make your gross margins, and gross margins, I've probably heard you say this before, pay the bills.
They do. The skills pay the bills, so do gross margins. Rob, you'd mentioned earlier recurring revenue versus non-recurring revenue. Is that like a discussion that you often have at the company? Like we shouldn't go down that path because it's not as durable as like a different revenue stream?
Yeah, we definitely do. But we also do think about something like that's out there in the market at the moment around compounding revenue as well. So we'd always start with subscription recurring revenue, but then if there's an opportunity to add on other types of revenue that might not be recurring but have like got great margin profiles, have got very, they're accretive to the customer in terms of the value you add, and also they're very low customer acquisition costs because you already own the customer, we'll look at those type of products.
Because that's essentially like icing on the cake, right? Because you already have this amount that you can book each month that you know that you'll reliably get. And then on top of that, you get this upside essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the cherry on the top, or the icing.
Have you ever had to say no to growth before because it wasn't the right kind?
Not necessarily no, but like maybe like we need to do some work is more like what we do internally. Really, we've got an extremely entrepreneurial CEO, and our vision's connected to our mission. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack at times, but there's never been a really hard no. We run the business so that we've got a baseline of like a baseline performance, like our BAU business, and then we'll make investments on top of that. Generally, the investments come in that category that not all of it's going to work. We know that, but that's sort of part of becoming a growth business and scaling to big heights.
And that definitely resonates with me because I've worked with hyper vision oriented CFOs who are going to march one way just because they know that's where the business needs to be. But sometimes along the way, they may be looking at like, oh, we can get into this category if we partner with, this company over here. But you look at like the margin profile of what you're getting from that relationship. It's like, yes, we do check the box that we're in the category now, or we have that type of product to address that customer need, but we don't make that much off of it. Or you could run into a scenario where they want to go into a space, but like the TAM isn't that big. So like with vision-oriented CEOs, do you often have to take a step back and look at the business case before going into an area?
Yeah, we do. Like it's speculative, like I said, and it's about getting that balance. Like you can't become, you can't be a CFO of a high growth tech business without like taking shed loads of risk. What we do again is like we've got our BAU business and our like very strong software business that we've built up over a long period of time. We've got really strong unit economics, and we use that to make the investments in potentially like what some people call moonshots. I might call it moonshots. My CEO might call them slam dunks. So yeah, that's how we look at it from the framework internally, or at least I do.
And so when you're talking with your team about the metrics that matter, what are the top maybe 3 that you look at on a regular basis?
Particularly when we're launching new products or going into new geos, it really does start with retention. Like you need customers to stick in a recurring software business. So that's a big one for me around gross dollar retention and net dollar retention. You want a gross dollar retention that we sell into the SMB market, which is pretty tough. We want a really strong gross dollar retention there, way above 80%, and ours is. And then just broadly, you want to know that you've got a net dollar retention, at least initially, above 100%. You want to know your customers stick, and even if you lose some, you're growing over time, so it's truly recurring. So I think retention's number one. For me, it all starts with retention. You haven't got it, you're not going to have a strong, you're not going to have the foundations of a strong forward-looking business. The next part is all around sort of like CAC efficiency. Your unit economics of acquiring a customer and how that profile looks with the revenue you're going to receive back is super important. You want to know what you can control, what you can't, and then when you double click into your CAC metrics, it's around your funnel conversion rates, close rates, demo to close one, etc. All the way through that funnel is super important. Yeah.
Do you have any metrics that you think are overrated or people place too much value on?
Yeah, this is probably one you're gonna have heard before. Yeah, a few people like throw it around is lifetime value. I think the theory is pretty solid, but when you've been in a business or your product's only been around for 5 minutes, you can't really sort of argue that your lifetime value's 20 years or something. So you're basing the future off today, and it's very much a guesstimate. Yeah, there's plenty of businesses that have like probably double clicked on that a little bit too hard. For us, it's all around retention, CAC efficiency, and the unit economics there and gross margins.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Ready to plan confidently, close faster, and report with accuracy? Here's what sets Planful apart. Imagine purpose-built solutions for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. It's easy to implement Planful in just weeks with minimal IT involvement, enabling seamless collaboration across your organization's key financial workflows. Best of all, Planful grows with you. Its unmatched scalability ensures that no matter how fast your business expands, Planful can keep up. See why over 1,500 customers worldwide choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Visit planful.com/metrics to see how you can elevate your team this year with Planful. They will hook you up. It is planful.com/metrics. Tell them your boy CJ sent you. Planful.com/metrics. I got a question for you. Is your billing system slowing you down? For most B2B SaaS companies, it's like a total mess. Manual invoices, revenue tracking workarounds, and endless spreadsheets that drain time and create errors. I've seen some ugly spreadsheets in my day. Your billing shouldn't feel like a never-ending math problem. That's where Subscript comes in, the modern billing and revenue recognition platform designed for SaaS finance teams that need both flexibility and accuracy. From automated invoicing and dunning to compliant, transparent revenue recognition and real-time analytics, Subscript eliminates manual work, reduces errors, and gives you a single source of truth for all your financial data. Finance teams using Subscript save over 20 hours a month. Wow. Closing the books faster and making smarter decisions with confidence. Don't let billing hold you back. Start scaling with ease. Learn more and book a free demo today at subscript.com. That's subscript.com. Tell me your boy CJ sent you. They'll hook you up. Hey, Metrics fans. Let me ask you something. Do you know what keeps CFOs and finance teams up at night? Well, it's not the complex analyses or forecasting models. It's the mind-numbing tasks of chasing receipts, reconciling expenses, and juggling 5 different systems just to track company spending. I was talking with a finance leader last week who calculated her team was spending an astonishing 20 hours weekly just on expense administration. That's nearly 1,000 hours annually on low-value tasks. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Rippling Spend. Rippling Spend is the only platform that automatically handles your entire company's spending in one unified system. What makes it different? It's built on Rippling's workforce platform. So when org changes happen, like someone getting promoted or changing departments, all approval workflows, access permissions, and policies update automatically. Picture this. When your marketing director goes on vacation, expense approvals don't sit in their inbox waiting for their return. Instead, they're automatically routed to the right backup approver. No manual delegation needed. Meanwhile, your finance team gets real-time visibility into all company spending with no more month-end surprises. As a Run the Numbers listener, you can get an exclusive demo showing exactly how much time your org would save. Just visit rippling.com/metrics to learn more. That's rippling.com/metrics. Do it, guys. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think LTV just has so many levers in it and even assumptions that even if you do come out to a number that seems sensible, you're like, well, what do I do to change this if I don't like the outcome? You know, there's not like one person within the company that like it's your role to change LTV.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if it was the clear like margin of success, is to be like everything would win, and you'd be investing tens of millions of dollars into CAC because your LTV's 10 years over CAC.
And what good is it, hypothetical 20-year LTV if like you only have enough cash in the bank for 18 months?
Yeah, exactly. I think people just get a little bit excited at times and realize, it's a unit economics and also your cash profile and your burn profile. So I often think about, I think I stole this from someone else who's a lot smarter and in terms of like software businesses and tech business. I almost think about our vertical P&L and our horizontal P&L.
Ooh, say more.
Yeah. So your vertical P&L is just like your traditional P&L, how you think about burn and gross margins and R&D investments over ARR, etc. And that's something we'll focus on. But then your horizontal P&L is looking at unit economics and the cost of acquisition and the payback periods, etc. We very much focus on both of those, or at least I do. And it's a balancing act between the two. And depending on where you are in the cycle of growing your business, will index more on one over the other. And back in the ZERP days, it was very much like a horizontal P&L and probably not enough of a focus on looking at those metrics. But I think now the shift has gone back to looking at your horizontal P&L and your vertical P&L.
What's the biggest blind spot in the burn now, monetize later approach?
Yeah, I think this is a cracking question. It's the bane of every growth CFO's life right there. I think the biggest thing is holding people accountable, is looking in the reverse mirror after people have made, if you're going to make the decision and go for it, and we back that decision, either me or as an executive leadership team, you got to go back and review the decisions and the outcomes. For me, it's also about setting milestones with some of that investment as well, and saying like, if you get to certain stages, you can unlock more. Just to keep the accountability there, because you're in when you're in a very entrepreneurial environment, it's very easy to say everything's working and to keep going and going and going, and it's sometimes you need that sort of like what do you call it? A chief reality officer, I think we call it internally. Maybe that's me a lot of the time.
That's a good one. Chief reality officer.
Yeah, to put the handbrake on, or just to say it's not working and let's do something else.
What does that check-in conversation look like to unlock more budget?
What we do internally at Employment Hero, we set structures in place for like quarterly investments, and then we'll go back and revisit them and have a real strong look at the business and the metrics that you're meant to deliver and see if it's working or not. But it's not, some of it's metrics and some of it's also just a gut and, do we think there's, legs in like continuing some of the investments? So it's a little bit fluid. I wouldn't say there's a complete framework, and there's rigorous debate often. Yeah.
Because I've tried to create budgets before where they had essentially like triggers to unlock additional budget if you had certain performance. And so, with some leaders, it went good. And with other leaders, I don't know, it just kind of went over their head and they thought that I was trying to almost make it too much of a video game.
Yeah, it does happen. Yeah, agreed. That stuff can get tricky depending on the personalities as well. But I think part of like my role is not just being like that CF no guy. is building relationships, building rapport, and having sort of open, robust conversations. So we can, you can really sort of like double click into what's working and what's not, and it doesn't become that arm wrestle of intellectual mind games.
Right. Mind games is a great way to put it. And I mean, it seems like, man, you're doing it right, because from what I know about Employment Hero, you're one of the most well-regarded execs there, despite having the position and, proverbial title of being a CF now.
Yeah, we've got a great team. One of the things that's is quite unique about us, there's about 4 or 5 of us on our exec team that have been around for like 6 years plus. I've been around nearly 10. Ben's obviously founded it. Dave is our co-founder. He's been around 12 or 13. So there's a lot of people been around, and yeah, it speaks volumes for our founders that people stick around.
You, like, just from being on this podcast for the past 20 minutes or so, you seem like a very approachable guy. Do you have any tips or tactics that you've used to make the CFO like more of an approachable figure? Because we've talked about this in the podcast before, just being called a CFO like off the gate. People sometimes come to you just with a different demeanor or attitude, or they'll phrase things differently. Like how have you made yourself more approachable?
I sort of like pretty much take nothing for granted. Like I'm like a lot of execs. You reach your position and you sort of like pinch yourself and go, wow, how am I really here? How did I get here? I'm just an ex-auditor from London that's like running this massive company. Like I honestly, most of my friends and family wouldn't really know how big Employment Hero is, and that's the way I like it. Just to keep humble, keep it real. And I think, again, going back to what I was saying around our culture and our leadership team, we're all approachable. Ben, we don't know everyone in the company now because we're too big, but we build relationships. We've got friends and colleagues that we know super well that, might not have got on and, might not have navigated their career, much more than when they started maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, but they're still here. They're on the bus. We know them. I know about their lives. I know about their kids, and we just keep it real, and we keep it very humble.
Well, I feel like there's a cultural aspect to this, being from Australia, which we can get into. And I was doing some research on Employment Hero the other day, and the first thing that came up was this headline that Employment Hero is the biggest export from Australia since Atlassian. I mean, man, do you feel any pressure when you see that type of stuff?
I can't remember seeing that one, but that's that's pretty cool. Yeah, look, that's a very kind comparison. In many ways, Atlassian is the pinnacle of Australian software exports, and has paved the way for all the tech ecosystem following over the last sort of like 15, 20 years. And yeah, comparing us to like Atlassian definitely is a very nice compliment. We don't really feel the pressure. We just feel inspired by them, and inspired by our, the reason we're here is all about our mission to help make employment easier and more rewarding for everyone. And that's what sort of like keeps us going. But the likes of Atlassian and Canva being Australian exports is pretty epic for a country of 27 million is pretty inspiring. And yeah, Australian business do really punch above their weight. I think it's a little bit a part of being so far away in the time zone, and just having to make sure we're well known. But yeah, it makes us, it's pretty inspiring where we've got to.
What's one thing about scaling a startup in Australia that people like me from the outside maybe won't understand?
Yeah, I think it's literally because you're so far away in the time zone, you don't really come under the radar of. We've got a maturing, a great VC community in Australia, but it's pretty new in comparison to North America and Europe. So capital is quite scarce. So many businesses like ourselves, used to raise very, very small amounts of money and were very, very capital efficient because they sort of had to be. And those disciplines have actually, at the time, it seemed, oh, why is this company, raising this at this val over there? But it made us very conscious of like what we needed to do and extremely disciplined and has made these companies go a lot further in their progress. So yeah, that was the shine. Yeah, and it took a while for the likes of the bigger growth funds from the US to come over to Australia and find these companies. And when they came over, maybe 5 years ago, they started investing very heavily.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit of background to that.
I know me and you both have mutual friends over at Airtree VC. They're one of the anchor investors in Employment Hero, which is awesome. And they're crushing it if you look at their portfolio early in Canva and a bunch of other amazing companies. What I've anecdotally heard is that, Australia's VC ecosystem, you can get capital if you really hustle early on, but there's not as much money to go around at the later stages. So as a result, companies just learn to be, I guess, more flexible and more efficient with capital, as you were saying.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes them, think bigger from day one as well, and know that they need to go offshore to expand and to increase the TAM, because obviously the Australian market's small in its own right. So that's what a lot of companies have done. And a lot of companies here think, don't just think Australia from day one. They think a lot bigger in terms of the global reach. They have to be to reach the scales that they want to, and to raise that additional capital.
I would love to dig into that, because a lot of Aussie SaaS companies like Atlassian and Canva, they had to expand internationally to really scale. What stage should an Australian startup seriously start thinking about going global? I mean, is that like a day one thing if there's 30 million people in the country?
Yeah, that's how we've always thought about it, and that's how I think the majority of businesses do, especially ones with very big visions on their future growth. You need it for your TAM, especially in markets that, where we're lucky that we can sell into every SMB in Australia, and that's a big market. So we become a very big business there. But lots of software businesses, their TAM or SAM is very restricted. So they need to think from day one very, very early. And you need to have that global mindset and that ambition, to be successful as well. Like, yeah, if you just want to be Australian based, that's great, but you probably shouldn't be raising capital, and you should probably have a different outlook about your potential exit or valuations or where you want to get to there.
Do you remember which country was the first that Employment Hero got pulled into?
Yeah, we actually expanded into Southeast Asia and the UK in COVID, and we launched into those two markets, also those three markets in COVID completely remotely. We're a remote first business, and it had its challenges, but was ultimately very successful for us.
So that was just demand from others in the market that kind of pull you there, and then you as the finance guy probably got to figure it out.
Yeah, there was a bit of that, but it was like we knew we've got a product that we can scale internationally. There's obviously some like compliance features in local markets around payroll and payroll benefits and HR, but ultimately the product can work in any market. And it was just about around the timing. We always had a plan to get to a certain size in Australia and then move internationally, and that was actually in our Series A deck that Ben and I wrote in 9.5 years ago. So it's great to actually for those plans to come into fruition.
Rob, you mentioned being remote first. How do you compete for top talent when you got the likes of Silicon Valley, London, and Singapore also pulling from the same talent pool?
Yeah, we actually think, we don't just think, we know that our remote first approach is actually our secret sauce. That means we can hire wherever we want, and that means we've got talent all through Australia, for example, in roles that if we had everyone in the office and you could only hire them within 25 k's of the Sydney CBD, we can hire them all through Australia now. So as part of our secret sauce is the remote first approach. We can find talent wherever, and it's been extremely lucrative for us. I think we employ people. We've got some hubs where we've got more employees. For example, in Vietnam, we've got a big development team, but it's all remote first. But we've got people, I think, in 25 different countries.
25 different countries?
That we employ. Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, my last company, we were in 26 different states, and I thought that was metal. Rob, is there a particular strength of the Australian startup ecosystem that makes it stand out?
Yeah, I think it's just some of that resilience that I was talking about before. Australia, in its current form, is quite, is an immigrant country. Lots of new people have come to the country over the last 50 to 100 years from different circumstances, and it's molded them together to be very resilient and very strong. It's quite interesting. I'm from the UK, and when I first moved over well over 20 years ago, Australians are so competitive at everything. If you play any type of sport or do any type of game, geez, they want to win. They want to win. And they like letting you know you win. And that's sort of part of the DNA and part of the reason why I think, it punches way above its weight in terms of sort of the global sort of ecosystem.
It's funny because I've heard and experienced, because I have some Australian friends, how how competitive they are. But I've also heard of this cultural idea in Australia where people can be a little bit skeptical of big ambition. It's not just Australia. We've talked to CFOs in the UK as well, and they call it tall poppy syndrome. Do you think that's a real thing?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, people look at us now and see that we're successful and want to have a dig at us. Yeah, the irony of that competition is there's the tall poppy syndrome. People want to get after you and find kinks and in the hose or whatever, and try and get at you and pull you down effectively. And I think it's, again, the resilience of the founders that we've got in Australia is some of the best going around. It just shows you can pull through that.
Because it feels like another barrier just from doing something that's already risky and ambitious, that you also have to overcome kind of this cultural force against you, especially if you're a founder with a startup, which is already, I mean, like a disagreeable thing to do.
Yeah, it is. It's I don't know, I find it quite strange in a way. People should be celebrating the fact that you're growing and you're adding to the economy and you are creating lots of jobs, but they're looking for small things to try and drag you down that most of the time are a nonsense or BS again. But I think that's what makes the founders in our founders and the founders in Australian business, or particularly software businesses, so resilient.
That's amazing. Well, congrats on the success so far. And if you're being mentioned amongst the likes of Atlassian and Canva, you're onto something. I want to get into forecasting. And you'd mentioned the 80-20 rule, Pareto rule, as the cool kids call it. How do you apply that in your financial decision making?
Yeah, so in terms of the 80-20 rule, we like that framework. How I really think about that, I look at it a little bit in our forecasting, but I look at it more in day-to-day operations and how I'm thinking about the business and the levers that really are going to make a material impact on the business. And I find those levers wherever they would be. And I know it's basically 20% of the work. And I know I'm going to get, within theory, 80% of the benefits. So that could be stuff that's not on the radar of people when they're in the weeds, when they're running sales orgs and stuff. That could be stuff like pricing or packaging or how we contract with customers, how they pay us, how that impacts cash flow. I'm constantly, I'm a pest to the business in terms of thinking about stuff like this and all the tactical initiatives that we could do. And working through and making sure basically people deliver on those is an important part of what we do.
I think that's part of your job, though, to notice which what is it, the Archimedes quote? Give me a lever long enough and I can move the world. I don't know. I totally just butchered the quote, but the idea there is you're going around and trying to figure out what knob can you turn that it gets the most output. And I think it applies a lot with sales orgs. If I add one more BDR, is that really going to help? Or should I be putting that next incremental dollar elsewhere?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good one, because quite often people get carried away with the top line on sales as well. And again, I love the top line, but then you need to factor in the cost as well. And I'm a big part of my sort of OCD, however you want to call it, is just around incremental benefits. What's the marginal cost and the marginal value that you're going to get? So, for example, we might do some tactical stuff that could give us an extra 10% of our sales, bookings number in a month, and everyone's high-fiving. I'm like, well, that cost us another 25%, and that doesn't actually work. So, again, that that guy comes back and the chief reality officer has to say, look, it's probably not worth it. And that's the education point, especially when you're at a big scale and you need to be growing the top line and growing the bottom line.
There are probably a lot of examples too where people have, the wrong 20% that they're hitting at. And when I think about like a software business where 70% of the costs walk on 2 feet, like if you really want to move the needle in terms of cost, it's going to be related to your hiring and pacing. And after that, it's going to be maybe your cloud costs. But then you probably get down to a figure where it's less than 10% of costs that can move the needle. But still, we use all this effort to, sort all our SaaS tools and look at our rent. And these things at the end of the day aren't going to impact like the overall outcome of what the P&L is going to look like to the same degree.
Yeah, totally agree. And some of the stuff with the headcount, I actually like click into this a lot within the business and get justifications around, if you want to grow that team, tell me how good your hiring manager, like how good are your people managers? Because I've seen, and we've made the mistakes ourselves, I've seen like people that we think are quite senior grow teams very quickly. Then they're not as strong a people managers as they think they are. And you end up with a bigger team going slower than they were before with, double the cost attached to it. So I'm very, very real about, it's not just about the headcount, it's about like execution. It's about having good people, top, A players executing, not the headcount.
I think every SaaS leader out there has also seen this happen at hypergrowth companies where you're growing really fast. So you just take your best possible rep and you make them the leader of the team or a part of the team. And then you step back and you're like, oh, that person was an absolute assassin when it came to taking down deals themselves, but they're maybe not a born people leader, or we've never given them the requisite skills to become one. Maybe they can be, but we're growing so fast that it's like best warm body, put them there. And then what exacerbates the problem is you've now taken your best salesperson out of a role who is crushing it, and you have that hole to fill.
We've actually been really good at that in our sales org. We've got some really strong and long-term AEs or sales reps, and we know they can't manage people, and that's not their strength. So we make sure we really think about making sure people stick to their strengths. And there's been others who have been pretty strong, maybe not as strong as those other AEs, but they've had a lot of, they've got maybe a little bit more EQ and know how to manage people, and we put them in leadership roles. And one of those people is like our GM of revenue, running ANZ, and he started off as a BDM just before I started nearly 10 years ago. So we're pretty good at doing that and spotting talent and moving them up.
And by the way, there's nothing wrong about a rep remaining an AE forever. In fact, that's usually the highest paid person at a company at any time. Like there have been many reps I've seen that didn't want to take on a people management role, but still they printed $1 million W-2 at the end of the year.
Yeah, I know some of those. That's tough. That's tough on us.
Yeah.
I feel your pain. We share that pain.
Good for them though. Good for them.
Yeah, definitely. Like honestly, if we're paying people big comms checks, the business is succeeding.
I also think it's a great advertisement for other reps because all the sales guys talk, right? Like about how much they're making in the bullpen and whatnot, whether it's a virtual bullpen or a real bullpen, but like they all talk. And that's an advertisement that if you work hard and do really well, you should be motivated to make a ton of money.
Oh yeah, they all know. They all know for sure. Everyone's got there's no bespoke comp plans. Everyone is very transparent.
Rob, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So I ask every CFO on the pod, what's something you've messed up on the job before?
I'm excited by this one. I'm really hoping you keep it in, but you might want to keep it out. But, I work hard and play hard, not so much now because I'm a bit older and I'm a family guy. But when I was younger, a lot younger, and I was an auditor back in London, I was working hard, but I was playing hard. And I had a really good friend of mine had what we call in the UK a stag do or a bucks party. We went out and we had a massive weekend. It didn't really stop, to be honest. And on that Monday morning, I was picked out of our audit team to go on an audit job overseas to Brussels in Belgium. And I was actually pretty stoked about it. And I remember I just moved out of home, and I remember telling my parents about it and how excited I was. But I ended up, because I partied a little bit too hard, I ended up getting alcohol poisoning I'd actually moved out of home. I had to go back and like stay a couple of nights with my parents' place. That was pretty embarrassing, and I had to tell work that I wasn't well, and I've never taken a lot of sick leave, so that was pretty embarrassing and a fun story just to show that we're all human. But yeah, I think I worked hard and played a little bit too hard, and I think I learned the lesson of realizing I was in a professional environment and I needed to call my jets.
Thanks for sharing that. That's big of you too. There are a lot of people nodding their head right now like, yeah, I've been pretty hungover at work before.
That was more than hungover, I can tell you. Nice.
Rob, you mentioned being an auditor. Tell us the fraud story. You uncovered fraud?
Yeah, so like a lot of English folk, we move over to Australia with, on secondments or to do some backpacking and work, and to come over for just a year and see what it's like. But you end up loving it and staying for life. When I came out, I was an auditor on secondment, and I was working with a mid-tier firm in Sydney, and I was on audit at a place called Bondi, which is one of the most famous places in Australia by a long way. It has got a really famous beach. On the corner of the beach is a famous club called Bondi Icebergs, which has got this famous pool. Yeah, anyone who's listening and comes over to Oz or to Sydney and goes to Bondi would see that pool. And there's a club attached to it called Bondi Icebergs. And I was doing the audit there, and it was great. There was like a little there was a clubhouse there, little restaurant. I was well looked after, given coffees and given free lunches, and it was all great until there was a reconciliation to do with some of the gambling machines and ATM cash machines. I was like, okay, can you just talk to me through how this works? And there was a sort of a balancing adjustment on the cash component. I was like, okay, can I count the cash component on that reconciliation? And it was, tens of thousands of dollars attached to it, and there was no cash to be found, and it was like a complete sort of balancing act. So unfortunately, some of the staff had been sticking their hand into the till, so to speak, and taking money out of that float, and it wasn't real, and the money had gone. And yeah, the free meals, or the lunches that I was getting, sort of like disappeared, and I ended up having to go back and report back to our partner and uncovering a fraud that was highlighted in the audited financials and got press coverage. So that was pretty spicy and pretty awkward.
How old were you at the time when you found this?
I was probably 26, just after I just came out.
I feel like that's every 26-year-old auditor's dream, to uncover fraud.
It was a little bit stressful, I'll be honest, because I think they had to cover up, and there's these clubs are like pseudo sort of not-for-profit entities, and there's people on the board of directors that are quite sort of established local sort of minor celebrities in some cases. So they covered it up. It was they didn't cover it up, but they sort of
How big was the hole?
The hole was, I think, about $40,000. Yeah, when I was 26, that was a while ago. So that was, a lot of money then.
That's not a rounding error.
I'm not sure you were even born then.
I was at the club that night.
Thought I recognized you.
I got in through the back. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools does your team use to get the job done?
Yeah, we've got a quite progressive stack for a growth software business, as you'd expect. We use Zura for subscriptions and billing. NetSuite is our GL. We use Stamply for AP. We use a local tool called EFT Shore for KYB checks on vendor payments. We use Airwallex, another fantastic Aussie tech story, for Forex payments and expense management. We use Employment Hero for HR and payroll, Trivada for cash treasury, and probably one of the most newest tools we've put in recently is Pigment, which is the third gen FP&A tool, which is an excellent tool.
Their name's coming up all the time on the podcast now.
Yeah, they've got a very strong solution. We're getting a lot of value out of it, but there's more to come. Yeah. Nice.
Last one I got for you. Other than fraud, what's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
Yeah, this one goes back to, when we were talking a second ago about this, the comp and, the sales guys. We've got one of our oldest AEs who's never going to become a people manager. I recently had a case. It's not like, it is a bit crazy, but it's like, it's a bit out there. He's wanting to expense an Uber car ride to unlock because his mother-in-law had locked his laptop in a car and he needed to get the Uber there to unlock the car to get it back. And he wanted the company to expense the fact that his mother-in-law had locked his laptop in the car. This guy is out there, top rep for years. Yeah, wanted to expense a $50 Uber ride.
This total space cadet. What do you think the longest Uber ride you would permit someone to expense would be? I've always wondered that when I see those come across.
Jeez. I don't know, maybe $150. It depends on where they are and the circumstances as well. We don't, because we're remote first, we don't have a huge amount of expenses anymore. I don't have to worry about it. Thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I missed a flight recently and I had to Uber from one airport to the other airport, which was like an hour and a half in New York City traffic. And I just felt like an idiot. And I'm like, I'm just going to wear this expense rather than put it through to myself to approve.
Yeah, exactly. Can you approve it yourself?
I just felt like a dunce for missing the flight. So I'm like, this one's on me.
I reckon we might need to get your controller to audit your expense claim just to make sure you actually did that.
I'm an honest person, Rob.
It's good to hear.
Rob, this has been a pleasure. I couldn't have thought of a better first guest from Australia. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights and experience.
Thanks for having me, CJ. And yeah, keep up the good work. All the best.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.